Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Larry Roberts. I'm treasurer for the coalition. So we'll start with the approval of minutes. So minutes are in our package. So can I get a motion to approve last month's minutes? Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All right. Any discussion about the minutes? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. Thank you. So we'll do introductions. We'll start this way over here in the room, and then we'll introduce on the Zoom.
Kennedy Dane. I am the Drug Endangered Children Program Coordinator with the Cheatham County Coalition.
Hello, I'm Melissa McGirt. I am the program manager for the Cheatham County Coalition.
And I'm Laura Durham. I'm the director of the coalition.
Amber Jones, I'm the Regional Overdose Prevention Specialist at Cheatham County Coalition. Julie Simpson, I'm the VFC Private Coordinator for Cheatham County Coalition.
All right, and online, who do we have?
If you want to unmute online, you can.
My name is Carolyn Lawson. Go ahead.
Yeah, Carolyn.
My name is Carolyn Lawson. I'm an outreach specialist with Tennessee Voices Statewide Family Support Network.
I'm Keisha. I'm just a community member.
Then we have, okay. We have Tanya and then Jennifer
Okay.
Triplett as well.
My name is Tanya. I'm a community member. Yes, a community member, homeschool mom, and I have Bree and Brittany listening as well.
And then Jennifer Triplett as well.
So we don't have any financials. We had some last.
Hi,
month
I'm Jennifer Triplett. I am a healthcare navigator.
Thank you.
So no financials for this meeting. We'll get those next month. And then we'll go ahead and jump right in. So Amber Jones is our Regional Overdose Prevention Specialist. She's going to be here to speak. So,
Hey guys, I'm introducing myself again, Amber Jones, Regional Overdose Prevention Specialist. And work for the Cheatham County Community Enhancement Coalition. We are a grant funded organization through the state of Tennessee, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Today, I'm gonna go over a training that discusses opioid stimulants and overdose prevention training. This is our training agenda, stuff that we will review throughout the presentation. Opioids, those are medications that bind to the opioid receptors of the brain. They can be in prescription form such as oxycodone, hydrocodone, basically your pain pills. And illicit substances such as heroin and fentanyl. Stimulants, those are medications and drugs that cause increased activity in the body. The person is more energetic, more alert, and of course, overdose. That's when somebody has a toxic amount of a drug and or combination of drugs, and it's overwhelming for the body, and the body shuts down. So here's a diagram of the drug trends in the state of Tennessee, primarily throughout the whole US. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we had a huge prescription opioid epidemic with something you might have heard called Oxycontin. There was Purdue Pharmacy that was promoting this drug as less addictive as other pain pills. And they were pharmaceutical reps. They were promoting this drug as it would slowly release the pain management over time. And these pharmaceutical sales reps, they were making a killing promoting this drug. People figured out real quick, you could scrape the top and bottom of the drug. And you could immediately get high, and it gave a heroin type of high. And it was basically became an epidemic where, people could just go into the doctor and say, I have back pain, and doctors were prescribing. You may have heard of pain clinics or the Bill mills. A lot of people were flooding to Florida, and they were lines wrapping around these, pain clinics. Drug dealers were actually paying people money to go in as a patient and get the prescription, and they were selling this. Well, the government finally realized, hey, we got a problem here. So they start cracking down on how doctors could prescribe this medication. So suddenly people that were getting this medication, they were getting it taken away from them. Well, then we still had addiction going on. So then they started hitting the streets and started taking heroin because it gave the same type of high effect. Well, then we got introduced to fentanyl. Takes a lot less of the drug and it's a lot cheaper to make. And again, it gives that same heroin type of effect. Currently, we may be facing another wave where people are mixing stimulants with the fentanyl. So we're getting stimulant use and the opioid use. Basically, person may not want to be nodding out from the fentanyl. They want that euphoria, but they don't want to go to sleep. So they're combining the drugs. And you can see here in this chart how that's correlated. So see how the green line prescription opioids and the heroin, that's all correlated. But as you can see on the chart, fentanyl and stimulant use has increased exponentially recently. But almost 3 out of 4 of our overdoses, it involves fentanyl. Polysubstance, that's when somebody consumes multiple substances at one time. You know, so the chart, 2021, 41% of overdose deaths involved an opioid and stimulant. Of those deaths, fentanyl was the driving factor that caused these deaths. Here's a map of the state of Tennessee. The darker shade of red indicates a higher overdose rate. Here you can see in the bottom right, that's Shelby County, Memphis. There in the middle, Davidson County, Nashville. There on the right, Knoxville, Knox County. Of course, it makes sense. Larger cities, we're gonna have higher overdose rates. But it also have an easier pipeline to those drugs. Notice the counties that are surrounding these larger cities, they have a darker shade of red. Cheatham County being one of the darker shades, because our next door neighbor is Nashville. In 2021, we have a reported 3,814 Tennesseans that had a fatal drug overdose. Of those numbers, 2,734 involved fentanyl. 2025 involved a stimulant. This is the data we have for Cheatham County. In 2021, we had 31 fatal drug overdoses. Of those fatal drug overdoses, fentanyl was a large contributing factor, 26 out of those deaths. And those 14 deaths were attributed to opioids and stimulants. And we have a reported 211 non-fatal drug overdoses. This is the overdoses that are at the emergency room visits. This is not including what is occurring in the household residence. We know the majority of overdoses, they are in the residences. And because people being fearful of criminal charges, they are not reporting these. So I could easily say that it would be more like 500 non-fatal drug overdoses in Cheatham County. Okay, guys, imagine if we didn't have these naloxone kids though, we'd be looking probably easily over 500 people overdosing on the fentanyl. Addiction, it's a treatable chronic medical disease involving multiple complex interactions amongst the brain, and it's influenced by a person's genetics, that individual's life experiences, and the environment that they're in. Think about heart disease. Over time, heart disease, it damages the heart. Well, addiction, it damages the brain over time. Over time, there's damage done, and people do things that they normally wouldn't do because of the damage done to the brain. It all begins with dopamine levels. Think about coffee, caffeine. We all know those individuals that can drink coffee at 9 o'clock at night and still go to sleep. Well, basically, someone that tries a substance that they enjoy, it goes to the reward center of the brain. The brain is saying, hey, I like this. Okay, a person continues to use that over time. Their dopamine levels naturally are lower than someone that does not use substances. And so it takes more and more of that drug to get that same effect. Basically, it's building up the tolerance levels. A lot of times people talk about with illegal drugs, they're always chasing that first high that they never get. There's an ACEs test that a person can take. It doesn't necessarily mean, hey, you're going to become addicted to drugs and or alcohol. It just means you're more vulnerable to becoming addicted based on childhood experiences. Notice it says if somebody scores a 5+ on their ACEs test, they're 7 to 10 times more likely to use illicit substances. If they score a 6+ on their ACEs test, they're 46 times more likely to inject substances. And it's all determined on factors such as, was there any form of abuse in the household? That could be emotional, physical, or sexual abuse. Neglect. Was there any form of emotional or physical neglect from the family? Household challenges. Did the child see their parents partaking in using illegal substances? Did children see mom and dad fighting verbally and or physically? Did they witness forms of mental illness in the household? Was the child separated from the family member because they went to jail for a long time? Other factors to think about, not everybody enjoyed school. They could have been bullied, or they could have just performed very badly at school and just dreaded going to school. Think about where we live. There's a lot of tornado activity in our region. So if they experience some environmental disaster, think about the families that lost their homes in Waverly when they had that huge flood. We could go and talk about the 2010 flood that occurred here. Also, those kids at that school in Nashville, where there was that shooting, that's going to have some impact on those kids. It's been long speculated that genetics does play a role in addiction, and science has found that to be true. Basically, they call it a generational cycle. From what I've learned, it takes 2 generations to break that cycle. So if your like my great grandpa, alcoholic, so it would take my grandparents and my parents not using a form of substance to break that cycle. That didn't happen. And I became an alcoholic. And also think about what is normal in the household. If you see mom and dad drinking alcohol every day and smoking marijuana every day, you think, hey, this is normal. Doesn't everybody drink and smoke weed every day? It becomes normalized. Think about co-occurring disorders. When I talk about co-occurring disorders, that's basically when somebody is self-medicating with a mental illness. Folks, we still got a lot to overcome when it comes to mental health. There's a huge stigma attached to it. Say, for example, I'm having these issues going on in my mind and having problems with my behavior. I'm gonna be reluctant to go to the doctor because I don't wanna admit that something might be going wrong up here. If I get diagnosed as being bipolar, people are gonna think I'm crazy. Or if I'm diagnosed as I have schizophrenia, people are gonna think I'm crazy. So I don't wanna face that and go to the doctor and get the medication I need to be on. So instead, I'm gonna self-medicate and smoke marijuana or go to the liquor store or the gas station and get alcohol. Well, folks, when somebody has a mental illness and they are self-medicating with all these substances, you're only making the mental illness worse. And that's when they call this basically double trouble. Also, community level factors. If you live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of high crime activity going on, that's correlated with drug activity. Most likely you probably have easy access to drugs. Like the saying goes, you are what you run with. If I'm hanging out with people that are using drugs, most likely I'm using drugs, right? Finances, well, you know, that's correlated also with drug activity. Quality of education. If you're in that neighborhood where there's high crime, high drug use, probably not the best schools around. And also healthcare access. A lot of the rural areas, they don't have that good quality healthcare access. Or if somebody doesn't have the financial means for insurance or going to the doctor. Here on the left-hand side is brain scanning image of someone that does not use any form of substances. Notice all the red activity going on. The brain scanning image of the picture in the middle. Notice that there's barely any red activity. All the red activity has diminished. And this is the first month someone not using meth. Folks, first month, they call this 1,000 nights. And the reason why they call this is the brain is obsessed with the drug of choice. That's why you see these rehabs, the schedules, they're jam-packed. They want to keep these individuals busy, keep them busy, because the brain is obsessing about their drug of choice. Think about how often you look at your cell phone in a day's time. That's how often that person is thinking about their drug of choice. So that's why in Celebrate Recovery, NA programs, AA programs, they reward people with the CHIP system. Getting past that 30 days is a huge milestone, folks. On the far right, you can see the brain scan image of the person that has went 14 months without using meth. Notice how there's a water restored activity going on there. This goes to show you that recovery does work. Of course, it makes sense if I'm not using a substance, there's low risk, right? So if you continually use a substance, you're at higher risk category of becoming addicted to that substance. In a training I went through, they talked about if a person takes a prescription opioid 5 days in a row, they are in that high risk category of being addicted to that substance. So that's how easy it is for a person to get hooked. A lot of people tend to think that those that get hooked on a drug and or alcohol, that they're just a bad person. You know, they're just a crappy person. Well, remember I was talking about the past traumas. Folks, when I was in rehab, there was a girl that talked about when she was 6 years old, her dad started raping her on a daily basis. That is very traumatic experience. So, of course, it's a lot of times traumas that they need to get past. They need some therapy. They need these support groups like these AA meetings, NA meetings, and of course the dopamine levels. The brain is wanting the dopamine levels to restore to the way it was. This slide says 40 to 60% of people do have a relapse. My opinion, I think it's higher. So that's why we have these naloxone kids, because relapse is a real thing. Think about, substance use disorder as someone having diabetes. It's something that constantly has to be managed. So also when dealing with someone with a substance use disorder, think of the way we say things to them. So, for example, the word addict, it's not necessarily a bad word, but over time, it's got a negative connotation. If I say, you're a dopehead, you're a junkie, you're a drunk, I'm acting like I'm better than you, right? So it's dehumanizing the person. You're devaluing them. Folks, people that are in active addiction, they already feel like they're a piece of crap. They've already called themselves bad things. Most likely they've ran all their friends, their family away. They've even done a lot of damage to themselves. So they've experienced a lot of hurt. And a lot of times they could be very suicidal. We see where a lot of suicides are attributed to drug use. So instead, we need more of a compassionate approach. Say this person has substance use disorder, or this person is living in recovery. Harm reduction is somewhat of a controversial program, but they have found that it does lead to a behavioral change. Everybody has a different form of rock bottom. Sometimes people can say, hey, I'm developing a problem here, and walk away from it. Some people, they get so addicted, like I said, it's a disease, that it takes them losing their house, their kids, whatever, for them to get that rock bottom. So basically, the concept of harm reduction is planting a seed in the brain for a behavioral change, for people to be more mindful of the way they use drugs. So of course, again, we want to be compassionate, the non-judgmental approach about how to help these individuals. And think about it, took time for someone to get into addiction. It's going to take a while to get them out of it. So patience is key. If I get thrown in jail for 6 months and I'm back in the same exact environment I was in, I'm going to use again. So they call it changing playgrounds. That you got to change the friends, may have to move. I've heard a lot of people say that they prefer to live on the streets before they went and moved in with their parents. Their parents weren't even using, but they were toxic. They had them toxic traits that made them want to go and use again. So think about that. Also be empowering to those. Like, okay, hey, can we call your sponsor? Can I take you to a meeting? There's MAT clinics, medication assisted treatment clinics. It's basically people are given medications to reduce the cravings for their drug of choice. And some of them can be used interchangeably, like Vivitrol, for example. That can be, that's a shot used to reduce opioid cravings and or alcohol cravings. And no matter what people think of it, they have found that it's led to increased survival rates, retention in treatment clinics, ability to gain employment and maintain that employment. It's led to a reduction in use of illegal substances, criminal activity, and spread of HIV and hepatitis C. Syringe service programs. Basically, it's a place where I could take my dirty needles and get clean needles. And again, I know it sounds very controversial, but again, we're talking about planting a seed in the brain for people to be more mindful of how they use drugs and to kind of get it in their mind for them to want that sobriety. And these clinics, like I said, give them clean needles, test for HIV, hepatitis C, STIs. And they can provide, referrals for treatment, education about safer drug use. And, they have found that it's led to a reduction in use dirty needles in public places, needle stick injuries for law enforcement, and people enrolled in this program, they're 5 times more likely to enter treatment when they're in this program. And these are the different locations where they are located in the state of Tennessee. Notice that they're located in all of our larger cities. We have 2 locations in Davidson County, and it's called Street Works, Nashville and Madison. Fentanyl, we have 2 different forms. We have the pharmaceutical kind that's primarily prescribed for pain management, cancer patients. And then we have the illicit kind. They call it synthetic. Synthetic means lab made. So that is what is killing folks. And it is very powerful. It's 50 times stronger than heroin. It's 100 times stronger than morphine. Notice here on the right-hand side, the different deadly doses. Notice with carfentanil, we're getting ready to get to that. It only takes 1 speck for a deadly overdose. DBI has identified more than 25 different types of analogs of fentanyl itself. Basically, when I'm talking about analog of fentanyl, it's a slight modification in the molecule makeup. There's only a line difference in the molecule makeup. Why do they have analogs? It's to keep people, allow them to pass their drug tests. So if I'm doing analog fentanyl, I can get drug tested and pass it. And I talked to DCS, and they actually have said where they've done in-home drug tests and they pass, but then I have to go and do an A&D assessment, more thorough panel drug test, and then they failed. And I've also been told, I need to check on this to see if this is true. I've also been told there's variants because they don't want the law enforcement to track where it originated. So which lab it came from. And carfentanil, for example, it's 10,000 times stronger than morphine. So this is very potent drugs, folks. Basically with marijuana and vapes, fentanyl, you can't taste it or smell it. So if it's not FDA regulated, we do not know what is in it. Even as a park ranger, I went through a training, and the law enforcement officer, he said if I touch fentanyl, that I could overdose. That is simply not true, folks. The only way that I can overdose, get it into my bloodstream, is a very large open wound or cut, or through the mouth, nose, or eyes. If you do suspect that you come into contact with fentanyl, immediately wash your hands with soap and water. Don't use hand sanitizer. For granule substances, we need to wash our hands thoroughly with soap and water. So like law enforcement officers, if they're outside in the environment, they don't need to be looking at drugs outside, because if wind were to blow, they could breathe it in and then they could overdose that way. That's why in these kids though, we do provide gloves. And when somebody has overdosed on an opioid, they're going to be very sweaty and hot because it's going to cause their body temperature to increase. So you might be concerned, well, they're sweaty. Can that still get through my skin? No, it cannot. So, but like I said, as a precaution, you need to still wash your hands. So with state of Tennessee, they use the analogy, think of drugs as a batch of chocolate chip cookies. So say, for example, we got a big batch of mess, right? Okay, think of med as a batter of chocolate chip cookies. So me, I love chocolate chip cookies. When I get a chocolate chip cookie, I'm hoping for a lot of chocolate chips. But in the case of the med, we don't want a whole lot of chocolate chip cookies, right? Because the more of the chocolate chips, the more deadly it can be. And we're gonna get to this a little bit later, but when it comes to like the counterfeit or the fentanyl press pills, you could get one of those deadly pills. I talked to a lady in Waverly whose son passed away thinking he took a Xanax and it was a fentanyl press pill. Another harm reduction principle we have, folks, is the fentanyl test strips. This was considered drug paraphernalia until March of 2022. They're doing a trial run and see what people think of it. Basically, it's a tool people can use to see if they got fentanyl in their drugs. They can test their drug with a little bit of water and dip the strip in there, and it'll let them know whether there's fentanyl present in that or not. And basically, they have found it's led to a behavioral change when people use these strips. You can get those from us. You can also get them from Amazon. And so people that do use these strips, they're, like I said, more mindful of how they use their drugs. They might be like, okay, I'm gonna make sure I got my naloxone kit nearby. Or I might make sure my buddy's here with me before I use drugs. Guys, I know it sounds silly, but we do have a resource, a 1-800 number. I can call and say, hello, my name is Amber Jones. I live at such and such address, and I'm gonna do some heroin. And they will listen to me, non-judgmental. And if I lose consciousness, they will call 911 to come and help me. So there is that resource for individuals. Some people have said to me, it's a setup. It is not a setup, folks. It's real. I can provide that number if someone needs it. But they might also be like, well, maybe I'm just going to use this one drug. I'm not going to, mix it with other drugs or alcohol. Basically, the key points about it tells you whether there's fentanyl present in the drug or not. It's not going to say, whoa, this is lethal or this is safe. It just tells you whether it's present. The part of the product that they do dissolve with the water, they're not supposed to consume that substance. It tests for most analogs, but not all of them. And no matter what the test results are with these fentanyl test strips, you should still make sure you've got your naloxone kit nearby. And basically, this is what it looks like with what we have. I'll just let you guys read that over. And this is how you test it with different drugs. And in a lot of the recovery places I go to, I do give the disclaimer that this could be triggering for some individuals. So I always tell them if they feel uncomfortable, just get up and walk around. So again, like I said, it works like a pregnancy test or COVID test, but it's different than what I would think. I would think 2 lines present would indicate that we got fentanyl, but this is actually opposite. 1 line indicates that we have fentanyl present. And of course, there's room for human error. Like I said, this was legalized in March 2022. It's a trial run to March 2025. Like I said, it tests for most animals, but it's not going to test for all of them. And on those fentanyl test strips that we hand out, there's a QR code on the back of it that people can scan, and they can take the survey and let us, State of Tennessee, know what they think of it. So the most important part, right? Overdose. Again, That happens when we have a toxic amount of a drug and or drugs in the system, and it's overwhelming for the body shuts down. A person can overdose on anything, basically, if they take too much of it. I read an article 3 months ago that a 5-year-old boy died overdosing from Benadryl. So that's why it's so important if you have children or grandchildren that would be in the household to lock up your medication. And at our coalition here in Ashland City, we have those prescription lock boxes that community members can get for free. They can come in our office. We're open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and they can come in and get a free lock box. But like I said, they could overdose on anything. Of course, tools for preventing overdose deaths is, of course, knowing the risk factors and the signs to look for an opioid overdose, a stimulant overdose, and how to respond to a drug overdose. So these are the risk factors for an opioid overdose. Basically mixing a lot of substances together. The most important part, though, I want to point out is when they went a long period without any use. Remember, I talked about the dopamine levels, basically building up the tolerance levels. When somebody relapses, or like I say, they want to celebrate getting off probation, they're going to use the same amount of drugs. And this is true with alcoholics too. They're going to use the same amount as what they were using before. This is the most deadly period. Specifically, the first 2 weeks, someone getting out of jail, getting out of treatment, getting out of probation. That is the most dangerous period. Like I was talking about counterfeit pills. Folks, people can buy pills off of Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, thinking they're buying a Molly or buying a hydrocodone or Xanax. It looks exactly the same. And they're fentanyl press pills. Sometimes, they escape by, but a lot of kids have been killed this way. And of course, the risk factor if somebody's had a history of substance misuse, chronically ill, if they're suicidal, they don't care what they're putting in their body, and the co-occurring mental health conditions, and of course, using alone, and they've had a previous overdose. So basically, when someone consumes an opioid, it attaches to the opioid receptors of the brain. It causes the breathing to slow down. And when you get too many opioids attaching, that's when the breathing stops. So, guys, I wouldn't want to take a run right now anyway, but I definitely wouldn't want to pull a hydrocodone and go for a jog. So these are the different street names for opioids. Basically, it's just slang names, or it's also ways that I could text my drug dealer. If law enforcement got a hold of my phone, they wouldn't know, right? Then I was asking for drugs. But the biggest thing I want to point out is the China girl, China White, with the fentanyl, and notice it says China White, again with heroin. Why do you think it's representing China? That's where the chemicals originate from. So they are calling it China because the chemicals are shipped from China to Mexico, and the labs are in Mexico. Nitazenes, this is very underreported. Interestingly, this was created to replace morphine, but they found that this is actually more dangerous than morphine. So anyway, but it's very underreported. Only recently did we start looking for fentanyl in toxicology reports. This is still not looked for in toxicology reports. So we know the data we have is very conservative. It's a very powerful opioid. It's synthetic as well. And it's caused 52 deaths that we know of in the state of Tennessee from 2019 to 2021. Excuse me, folks. All the officers I've talked to about this has said it's going to take a lot more of the naloxone kits to revive a person. if it even does. Sometimes there isn't enough to revive a person on this, and this is being laced in fentanyl and meth. A lot of people think from Hollywood movies, a person just overdoses immediately after using the drug. That can occur, but sometimes it can happen slowly over time. I really like to think of River Phoenix as an example. It took over an hour for him to die. He done a speedball, basically, mixing like a opioid with a stimulant in a drink he was drinking. And there was all those signs there, but nobody knew the signs. He could have been saved. Basically, anytime there's changes in my skin tone, anybody's skin tone, you get more pale. Like, so if I got real pale and clammy, or a darker individual, they get ashy or ashen like. We got a medical emergency of some type going on. And clues to indicate that we may be getting opioid overdose is in very small pinpoint pupils, nodding out, slurred speech, almost kind of like drunk on, scratching a lot. I've also been told it kind of looks similar to like a diabetic attack, that it can look very similar. Signs that we do have an overdose occurring is, of course, they're unconscious, right? Very slow, shallow breathing, maybe like the choking, gargling, snore-like sound. I don't even go by pulse, because if you're in a panicky situation, your pulse is going to be racing, and you're going to be like, yeah, they got a pulse when it's really yours. But they could be vomiting. Of course, like I said, the body limp and work clammy like. And like I said, they're going to be sweaty. These are the street names for different stimulants out there. Again, it's slang names or names to deter law enforcement what they're texting their drug dealer, what it is. And some of them, to give them cool names like Ritalin, Skittles. So stimulant overdose, when somebody is experiencing stimulant overdose, it's known as overramping. And they can experience anywhere from a physical event and a mental health event. They can have a heart attack, stroke, or seizure, extreme paranoia, hallucinations, or psychosis. And when someone has experienced a stimulant overdose, they are very scared. This is a very frightening experience for them.
Try to,
Okay, so, okay, now it's working, I don't know what I did. So risk factors for a stimulant overdose, of course, being awake for too long, for days maybe. Dehydration, a lot of people that are on speed, they got that cotton mouth going on for them. And it's almost when they're on stimulants, it's almost like they become animalistic. They're very aware of their surroundings. A bunch of people came in and I'm high on stimulants, I could start freaking out. I don't know these people, start getting scared, uncomfortable. Changes in the blood pressure, they're gonna have high blood pressure. There's gonna be changes in the heart beat. Most of the time it's gonna be a real fast heartbeat. Of course, stimulants, they curb the appetites. This is the physical and psychological symptoms broken down a lot more. Folks, you see somebody home mad, a lot of times they're gonna be doing mouth movement, doing like their hand like that, walking like that. They're gonna have a lot of tremors, limb jerking going on. I know it looks silly when I do it. But the biggest thing to point out, the difference between an opioid and a stimulant is people high on stimulants, they're gonna have them very large dilated pupils. It's almost like they've been to the eye doctor. And if they're really messed up, their whole eye could look black. And again, they're going to be very paranoid. probably very irritable. Xylazine, this is a relatively new drug, emerging drug, but it is here, folks. I had a Cheatham County deputy just show me a picture of a guy's arm. The lower part of his arm was black tar. It's here in Cheatham County, and it's easy to access. And a lot of lawmakers are realizing this is becoming a problem, so they're quickly working to develop some laws and put those in place to regulate it a little more. But basically, it's xylazine. On the street, it's known as Trank. It's a veterinary tranquilizer. And naloxone kids are not gonna work on this, because this goes straight to the heart. And basically what happens with it, it causes necrosis. So a person loses the blood flow to the surface of the skin, and their skin dies. And some people are losing their limbs due to this. What articles I have read about this, a lot of people that they've gotten too addicted to like fentanyl, for example. And they're just using the fentanyl at this point to keep from withdrawing. But they're not getting high anymore. So they're purposely lacing this in with their drugs so they can continue to get high. And like I said, we're still learning more about it, but with what data we have gotten from it, these are the top drugs that it's being laced in. Folks, this is not the days where it's okay to experiment with drugs and be unscathed. So many people are dying just experimenting with drugs, not even getting to the addiction phase. Okay, remember I was talking about polysubstance use? We see a lot of that going on. I was talking about that could be our new wave, what we are experiencing in Tennessee. It's like speedball. I just told you speedball. That's when we got an opioid and a stimulant mixed together. Sometimes they want it to meet it together. So sometimes we're like, what in the world is that? What kind of overdose is this? Or what if it is a diabetic attack? What if we don't know if it's drug related? Go ahead and give it to them anyway. Give them the naloxone anyway. You all should be able to see on your table one of these. Each table has one of these. One's right in front of you. It's just for training purposes to let you see how much pressure it takes to push that. May seem ridiculous, but these are things not to do. We've seen them in some Hollywood movies where people want to do this to revive somebody. There's actually a lady facing criminal charges out of Greenbrier for kicking the crap out of her friend, trying to revive her. So don't try to beat your friend up to try to revive them. Or, no ice baths, you could drown them. A lot of people are thinking, hey, let me shove my fingers down their throat and have them to throw up. Well, they could start having seizures and bite their tongue off or swallow vomit or bite your fingers off. So basically, when you administer the naloxone, like I told you, when somebody consumes opioids, it attaches to the opioid receptors of the brain. When this stuff kicks in, it's going to bump them off the opioid receptors, and it's going to bind to those receptors much more powerfully than the opioids do. And this is going to last 30 to 90 minutes. And because those opioids are not attached to the receptors anymore, they're no longer going to feel the effects of that drug. They're not going to be high anymore, and they're going to be sick. They're going to be real bad sick. But don't worry about giving someone the naloxone. They cannot overdose on it, and it is not addictive. And just things to remember is, again, this does not work on the xylazine, the Trank drug, and it does not work on stimulants. But with what the data we've seen, we still need to use that naloxone because fentanyl is responsible for most of our fatal drug overdoses. There's two different forms of the naloxone. We got the intranasal kind, in the intramuscular kind. We carry the Narcan brand, it's 4 milligrams, and also the Cloxoto, that's 8 milligrams. We're pushing these, the Cloxoto out to the civilians, because we are seeing such higher concentrations of fentanyl in these drugs. The only bad thing about Cloxoto, because it's a relatively new drug, it's gonna expire sooner than the Narcan does. But in these kids, Chelsea and I, we put our business card in them, and when it gets close to expire, you can just give us a call up and we can replace that kid. The intramuscular kind is primarily used by a lot of EMS workers. And you can inject that in the arm between the elbow and the shoulder. It used to be the outer thigh, but now it's in the arm. A lot of people think that these kids would be best served to be placed in their vehicle. If you think it would be best to be put in your car, just try not to have it under direct sunlight. Try to keep it as cool as possible. And do be mindful that this is a liquid. So if it's freezing temperatures outside, this liquid could freeze. So ideally, we want this stored in room temperature. And like I said, it's a medicine, it expires. I've had some people say, well, what if I have somebody overdosing and I got expired kit? It's better than nothing. So basically, when you are responding to someone overdosing from an opioid, of course you want to assess the situation, right? You want to make sure it's safe for you to approach that individual. Then you want to add on, hey, are you okay? If they're not responding, then we want to move on to the sternum rub. We want to make a fist like this. And with the flat part of our fist, we're going to rub the sternum real firm. If they're going to respond, they're going to respond to that. Of course, in these packages, it comes with 2 doses. Each one of them was, this is 1 dose here, so you're going to get 2 of these. So of course, we're going to put on our gloves that is in our kits, right? And we're going to take it out of the package, and the directions are there too, if you need to read those. But we're going to want to tilt their head back so the medicine can go down the nasal passages. The reason why I pass out these things, because like I said, I want you to see how much pressure it takes to push that in. I'm not going to want to, I'm just going to stick it up their nose and push that. I'm not trying to give them a COVID test. So we don't want to cause any damage. So with the pressure from these 2 top fingers, I can help push that in there. So I'm going to put on my gloves, put the nozzle up the nostril till my fingers touch the tip of the nose. Then boom, that's 1 dose. Of course, you know, if I have my naloxone with me right now, I'm going to give that to the person first. Then I'm going to call 911. Okay, say my kid's in another room, I'm going to call while I'm going to get the kid, because we want to get that kid in them as soon as possible, because we don't want them to go longer than they have to without oxygen or blood flow to the brain. A lot of people are apprehensive to do CPR with someone because they don't want to do the rescue breaths. Well, now they're saying that you only have to do the chest compressions. And with someone we suspect with using drugs, we don't want to do the mouth to mouth anyway, because we could get fentanyl on our lips, right? So we want to may have to do chest compressions. Just a reminder though, still have to do rescue breaths on children 8 years old and younger. Of course, that they most likely will be throwing up. You're going to want to place them in the recovered position where their arms and legs can support themselves, keep from rolling. So we want to put them that way so they don't choke on their own vomit. A lot of people have been guilty, like, oh, I'm just going to Narcan the crap out of them. That'll get them revived sooner, right? Some people have that mentality, but it takes 2 to 3 minutes for that to kick in. And like I said, naloxone can't hurt somebody, but like I was saying, the naloxone causes the person that used the opioids to withdraw. The more unnecessary doses that you give someone, the sicker they're gonna be with their withdrawal process. So it's very important to wait the 2 to 3 minutes. Say it's been 2 to 3 minutes, I still don't have EMS here, and they're still not revived. By the way, don't be hovering over this person. You're gonna wanna stand back while waiting for them to, be conscious. Say it's been 2 to 3 minutes, I wanna get my second dose out of the kit. If I've administered the first dose in the left nostril, I'm gonna administer the next dose in the right. So we're gonna change it back and forth. Stay with that individual. A lot of times when they do come to consciousness, they're not gonna remember that they overdosed. They might be upset with you that you took their high away. And like I said, they might react in a violent way, so that's why it's very important to stand back from them while waiting for them to respond. Like I said, we got polysubstance a lot of times going on, that meth may kick in. So just try to calm them down. Human instinct though, like say I come to, I'm withdrawn, I'm hurting. I'm gonna just do some more drugs to feel better, right? Makes sense, right? Don't let them do it. Like I said, this stuff lasts 30 to 90 minutes. If they do more drugs, it's not gonna affect them. Them opioids are basically gonna hang back tight. And when that naloxone wears off, it's gonna reattach to the opioid receptors of the brain, and we're gonna have a second overdose. So ideally, the person would go to go a whole day without using drugs, but we definitely want them to go 2 hours without using any more drugs. Because there has been issues with people being fearful to call 911 or take their buddy to emergency room. There have been deaths due to that for their friends not seeking help. So kind of to counteract that, state of Tennessee developed the Tennessee Addiction Treatment Act. It's to provide some criminal protection for the person administering the naloxone and some criminal protection for the person overdosing. It used to be first overdose, but July 1st, they changed it to multiple overdoses. So it's very situational. It's at an officer's discretion, but it's to provide some protections from criminal charges. Also, we have the Tennessee Good Samaritan Act. That's to provide civil liability. So if you in good faith try to save someone's life, you are protected from civil liability. A lot of helping professionals and family members and friends of those with substance use disorder experience what they call compassion fatigue and burnout. And it makes a lot of sense, especially like law enforcement, for example. And I remember a few years ago with Cheatham County, reading that we had one guy, same guy, overdosed 3 times in one day. And the Cheatham County deputies had to, give him Narcan. Well, I can understand how you would be like, gosh, if John doesn't care about himself, why should we? But they have to take a step back and reassess why they got into the job to begin with. And, it's very understandable with family members. Like, she said she was gonna be clean. She's promised over and over she's gonna be clean. She has stolen from me. So it's easy to get those mental, emotional symptoms, physical symptoms. Folks, sometimes with family members, it can become an addiction to the family members themselves. Like they thrive in the chaos. Just to give an example, sometimes, with AA community, they develop the term codependency. A lot of times when you see toxic family members and addiction going on, you got the codependency going on. And people don't know what boundaries are either. got a guy, from my hometown hooked on meth and alcohol. Had a nice house, lost his job, family kept paying his bills. And I remember saying to the father, quit paying his bills. Well, what if he loses his house? Let him lose his house. Well, had restraining orders against him from the dad, the mom, the grandma, because he had tried to beat them all up. Even the mother tried to put a cigarette out on her forehead. Last Monday morning, he blew up her condo. Was making meth in his bedroom. So now she's lost her condo. So, very important that, like the saying goes, you gotta take care of yourself before you can take care of someone else. Someone is causing damage to you, you gotta establish those boundaries. And so, like what they teach in the rehabs is basically like self-care. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. A lot of people, when they're experiencing a lot of bad things that's going on in their life, they might, and I'm kind of guilty of this. It's just obsessing, and then you just want to work more and more. And that's actually not taking care of the problem, it's just making it worse. I think I need new batteries.
It may be a me. 1 second.
Okay, so what forms of naloxone are available? See?
We'll try again.
Yeah, that's good. More than one dose of naloxone may be necessary before EMS arrival. What should you should give the naloxone and leave the patient alone.
Keep going, it's just, I guess it's a bit for, yeah.
I think
When administering intramuscular naloxone, where is the best location to give the injection? Yeah. How long does naloxone last? Naloxone is an addictive substance. How do you determine when someone is overdosing? Yes, all of the patient is unresponsive even after that sternal rub. The patient has shallow breathing or is not breathing at all. Pale, clammy skin. Remember, I talked about that blue skin around the lips and the fingernails, maybe purple. Extremely small pinpoint pupils. Call 911 as soon as you suspect an overdose. Chest compressions or CPR may be necessary. What law protects you from civil liability when administering naloxone to someone you suspect is overdosing? What about criminal? Or okay, basically, you can get the naloxone from any pharmacist without a doctor's prescription. I have been told that some pharmacists require the training certificate. Where you're sitting at should have a printout of the certificate, just write your name and today's date on it, and it shows that you've been trained. Depending on your insurance, it can cost anywhere from $0 to $150. In March of 2023, Tennessee passed where this will be over the counter status. So pretty soon we ought to see this sold over the counter. If they can sell Tylenol at their store, they'll be able to sell naloxone. But you can get it from me for free if you get trained, that is. We know a lot of people are apprehensive to respond to surveys because we all love surveys, right? Or they're afraid it might get reported to law enforcement. If you use our kit, we got a QR code in the kit that says that you have used it. If you have used your kit, you can scan this QR code, or you can call me and we can report that for that. That helps us out with our grant. But like what I said, we know this number is conservative, But folks, these kids have saved over 53,000 Tennesseans' lives since 2017. So that's amazing. Things that you can do in your community. My biggest thing I say is break that stigma with mental health, mental illnesses. Break the stigma with substance use disorder. You see somebody that needs help, help them, or give them the resources needed to help them out. Get other like churches involved. Remember Tennessee Red Line, or just use us. We here as the coalition are here to support the community. That is the biggest thing that we want to remind the community and ourselves. This is Laura Durham is our supervisor. She's the director of the Cheatham County Community Enhancement. Be aware of like drug drop-off locations. Basically, folks, you can Google it. But we do have drug take-back days. We got 2 weekends of the year in April, and we will be having one in October with the Cheatham County Sheriff's Department. And again, like I said, we got the Tennessee Red Line as a resource that can refer people to treatment centers. We also have the crisis line. Again, my name is Amber Jones. I represent Region 5N1, 8 counties, so I'm on the road quite a bit. If y'all can, scan that QR code on the bottom right-hand side. Even though my boss can see me, it just lets her know I was here and showed up for work. And you can let Tennessee know how you feel about the presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Anybody online?
Anybody online? They can email me, Alyssa, tell them they can email me
I say,
and ask for a certificate, and I can email them a certificate. And they can just come by the office one day if they want to and pick up the naloxone kit.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Any questions, any online? So, announcements, anybody have announcements here in the room?
I have a couple. Anybody else?
Yeah. go ahead.
So we have Strengthening Families that will be starting up September 11th on Monday nights. This will be our 3rd year and our 5th group that will be going through. It's 12 weeks long. It's for the entire family and it is prevention based. So we talk a lot about drug and alcohol use and how to talk to your children about those issues and building those stronger bonds to help. We look at protective factors and so forth. So that's going to be on Monday nights. It's free. We feed them supper every Monday night. We do a lot of gift cards and things throughout the 12 weeks to encourage as well. So if anybody wants those. And then we also have another program, not sponsored by Tennessee Voices, but it is called Trust-Based Relational Intervention. It is an evidence-based program specific to families who are raising children that have been through trauma. So like foster parents, adopted children, or other family members raising a sister's children, grandparents, aunts, uncles, that sort of thing. And helping them understand the trauma base behind that and ways to interact effectively. And that's going to be on Wednesday nights, starting September 13th. And it's going to be at Faith Community Church, right across from Cheetah Middle. from 6 to 8, and it's for parents only. So the Monday nights for parents and children, Wednesday nights, parents only from 6 to 8. But I have information on both of those. We may remove those. Thank you.
Any other announcements?
Joyce, do you want to talk about the overdose?
Yes, so I was gonna say, August 31st is Overdose Awareness Day. The coalition will be having a memorial event, at Gateway Church. It begins at 6 p.m. If anyone wants to be, anyone online who would like to be an exhibitor at that event, you can email either Amber or Chelsea, and they'll get you some more information. There's also a QR code on our social media that if you or someone you know wants to submit a name of a loved one that was lost to overdose, you can do that and their name will be on display at the event, to memorialize them. And then, like, Amber had said, we have lock boxes at our office. If you want to grab some for your organization, for your family, please stop by. We also have quit kits as well for youth and adults. If you know someone who is looking to quit and would like some resources and ways to go through that process, you can pick those up at our office as well.
Any online, announcements?
We do have a survey, so you can scan the QR code. If you'd rather fill it out, on paper, we have some paper copies up front. Just to give us some feedback on our meeting.
Great. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Please, for a second.
Second.
Great. Any discussion before we adjourn? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. Thank you so much.
Thank you.